Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And you know what time it is. It is Friday. It is Fiction Friday. It is time for yet another tale of exactly 1,000 words inspired by a piece of artwork written on the spot without an outline whatsoever. And today I am exploring my inner schoolgirl. I know that sounds weird. It sounds terrible. You've seen the artwork, at least in the thumbnail, but I think it'll provide more context once I get there. But I needed something nostalgic because I believe this is a story of nostalgia. This is a story of letting go. This is a story of friendship. And so what I chose was an album called Remember by the Icelandic composer Olafur Arnalds, or something in the vicinity of that. But it was nice and mellow and calm, exactly what I needed to channel my inner schoolgirl. So cue it up and let me take you on this journey while we check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Aoi With Her Friends. It's by an artist named Enzu Fu from Wuhu, China. This was another one of those pieces of art where I decided to challenge myself. It's very out of my comfort zone. It's very different than what I normally do, but it made me feel nostalgic. Now, I'm not a schoolgirl, but I can empathize with this fact. We have two friends walking away in the distance. We have a girl who is facing us, looking down, the sun in her face, and it feels like she's remembering something or acknowledging something or accepting something. And I love how it almost feels like it's twilight, the sun's going down, we see these reeds in this tall grassy field in the distance, and they are walking toward it, and everything's out of focus pretty much except our subject, Aoi. So this one really inspired me to tell a story of nostalgia, a story of friendship, a story of growing up, I guess. So Enze, thank you so much for this artwork. Hopefully I can find my inner schoolgirl. All right, well, that said, let's see what I came up with. Aoi tied her shoes for the third time. Hurry up, Aoi, Ren called from the sidewalk outside the school gates. The tree Aoi sat under rustled what leaves were left on its spider-like branches. The wind plucked a single leaf free and hurtled it toward Ren and Nico, who were crossing the street. Aoi shivered, thinking of graveyards and ghosts, then pushing her glasses up on her nose and followed after her friends. Wait! Aoi called as Ren and Nico rounded the corner with the blue fence, the path below spattered with cherries. They didn't wait, so she followed their cherry footprints, which faded in the direction of the field they always crossed on the way home every day. But not tomorrow. Aoi skidded to a stop as the world opened to grass she could get lost in, a sky that might carry her away, and her two best friends wavering on the horizon as if they were made of paper, two brushstrokes barely there, ready to be crumpled and discarded. No, Aoi said, but the wind stole her word and tossed it into the grass, which chittered with glee. She stuck her tongue out at it. What's taking so long? It was Ren, her soft face smiling below a curtain of bangs. Sorry, Aoi said. Ren tossed a pebble at Nico, who leaped as it hit the ground with a crack and bounded into the grass. Slender white shapes rose from where the pebble landed. Two cranes, black tail feathers, neck, with a red scalp that matched the color of the cherried path. Aoi looked back the way she had come, to find the other bird, the third one. Finding nothing but the blue fence far in the distance, she said, There are only two. Ren retied Aoi's braid that had come loose. Like us. Aoi beamed. Really? Ren shrugged. I guess so. You guess? Why are you being so weird? My parents will be mad if I don't get home soon. We should go. Why? Ren looked at her as Nico approached. I just told you. But remember when we played out in the field until it got dark and... Nico slung her bag off her shoulder. And we all got grounded for a week, even the weekend? Yeah, Ren said. But, Aoi said. But what? Nico said. It's the end. Ren and Nico looked at each other and laughed. They both stood and brushed off their knees. The two cranes stood on the path, preening their wings. We have to find the third one, Aoi said. It's us. Ren said so. Nico made a face at Ren. Huh? Ren blushed, looking down. Her hair whittled her face into a sliver. If she didn't have bangs, it would have been gone completely. You guys are weird, Nico said. She faced the cranes and mocked their preening, croaking a song that sounded nothing like theirs. The two cranes ignored her, exploring the edge of the path with their beaks. "We're the weird ones," Wren said and rolled her eyes. She kicked Nico's back to get her attention. Always stayed where she was, looking for the third crane that must be there, stalking the shallows she knew were there but couldn't see. Far behind, like her. Left behind, like her. Wren joined Nico in her charade, and they giggled when the cranes finally noticed them, spreading their wings wide and taking flight toward the sun, where no silly girls were to be found. Aoi closed her eyes and felt the sun on her face. Her glasses slipped down her nose, but she let them sit there, ready to slip off. All she had to do was scrunch her face, and the parts behind her ears would rise over them and the weight would do the rest. But she didn't. Instead, she looked through her lenses, which were as far as they could be from her eyes without falling off, noting the way they warped and bulged the world, making everything in the middle big and everything along the outside squashed. They did the same to Wren and Nico, who had continued along the path toward home. Soon the path would split, and they would go their separate ways. "And you'll go away for the summer like you always do," always said, "both of you. But it's different now. You'll be there and I'll be here, and then you'll be somewhere else after." Always sat down and untied her shoes. She undid her braid and shook it free in the breeze. She let her glasses fall off her face, but the frame caught a lock of her hair and swung into the grass. She searched the blur of color for her glasses. It was green and brown for a time. Then hands joined the search, and her pale fingers reminded her of the two cranes. She suddenly didn't care about her glasses anymore, and balled her hands up until they didn't look like cranes at all. Handfuls of grass were what they found. "Aoi," Wren and Nico said together. Aoi looked up at her friends, who didn't look like cranes at all. Nico taller, with hair past her shoulders. Wren shorter, with hair above her shoulders. Then they knelt down to her level. She felt her braid retied. She felt her glasses returned, which allowed her to see their faces, the sun behind them, dabbing the tops of their heads with red, just like the cranes. Aoi tied her shoes for the fourth time. "We can wait a little longer," Wren said. "We can," Nico said. "Remember when we played tag out there one time, and Wren fell into the stream and pretended she was drowning? You guys were crying so hard," Wren said. "So mean," Aoi and Nico said in unison. "Hey, look," Wren said. The two cranes picked their way through the reeds ahead before taking flight. "It's us," Nico said to Wren. Aoi smiled. "It is." Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I'm so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, maybe what I learned. So let us dig into the writing immediately so we can take a closer look. So I should have picked a better name, first of all. However, this was the title of the artwork, Aoi With Her Friends. So unfortunately, I was stuck with it. It was difficult to pronounce while I was narrating the story over and over and over again, but here we are. Anyway, what I wanted to do with this story really is capture what it's like to be a child when your friends are moving away. I'm sure you've all experienced this when even you change schools. You know, school is a world away as a kid. Those distances are not easy to traverse, at least when I was a kid way back in the 80s. And inevitably, sometimes you forget your friends. You lose touch for a long time, and that's what I was trying to accomplish here. I was trying to have this little girl who was very troubled. She was going to lose her two friends. This was the last day of school for the summer. They were either leaving elementary school and going to middle school, or maybe just moving altogether, going to a different city. It doesn't really matter, but the whole point is they were leaving. Aoi was left behind. So that's what I began with. I started with her tying her shoes for the third time. She's trying to keep her friends for as long as she can. So she's stalling. She's clearly tying her shoes over and over and over again, but her friends have already left. We have "Hurry up, Aoi," Wren called from the sidewalk outside the school gate. So they're already on their way. And the imagery that I come up with next is a little bit haunting for a little girl. She's talking about observing a tree and its spider-like branches, thinking of graveyards and ghosts. And I think this just really illustrates her mindset at the time when she knows she's going to go on this journey. She knows she's going to lose her friends at some point, and it will definitely be a bittersweet experience. But she gives in. Wait, so she chases after them because the images she has conjured in her mind are far scarier than what's to come, apparently. And so finally, when she rounds the corner of this blue fence below this cherry tree, she sees this massive world of grass she could get lost in, a sky that might carry her away, and her two best friends wavering on the horizon as if they were made of paper, two brushstrokes barely there, ready to be crumpled and discarded. So I think you can get the subtext there, the metaphor there. My one regret with this story, I think, or the one that stands out to me anyway, is that I didn't really tell this in the voice of a child 100%. I really like to write in a limited third person, meaning everything from the descriptions to the way the thought processes are described needs to be coming from that POV. This was probably a little too advanced for a girl of her age, but there it is. And I think I noticed some other elements later in the story that suffer from the same problem. But anyway, let us move on. So her friend, Ren, she comes up. And then this is when she begins to tell her tale. Maybe, but she trails off here. And Ren decides to get Nico's attention, throwing a rock at her. And this attracts, or disturbs, I should say, these two cranes. These slender white shapes rose from where the pebble landed. Two cranes, black tail feathers. And yes, I know this is a comma splice. I realized once I read the story, but I can't go over, right? I got to be at exactly 1,000 words. And the reason why I was honestly looking just for a common Japanese bird, and when I paused to do a quick search, it seemed that these particular cranes were very special to Japanese culture, and so I decided to go with those because they were very iconic. They're in a lot of artwork and different things like that. And I'm sure you can guess these are symbolic of the two of them, or the three of them, hopefully, right? Because she cannot find the third one. But when she says there are only two, Ren reties the braid that has come undone and says, like us. And this excites her, right? Because she's feeling close with her friend Ren. But then she kind of throws it away with, I guess, you guess, why are you being so weird? And then finally, Nico shows up and spoils the rest of the fun because, again, Aoi, see, it's hard to say, is trying to stall them, to get just a little bit longer, right? She wants to hang out with them. They're on this path. They always go this way on the way home. She's trying to just capture that moment. She's trying to hold on to it for as long as she can when she says, but remember when we played out in this field until it got dark in? And then Nico crushes it with reminding everybody that they got grounded. And then Ren is in on it as well. She agrees. Aoi just keeps going like, but, and but what? It's the end. And so she really vocalizes that moment, what that means to her anyway. And it sounds dark. It sounds very finite. And maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But to these two girls, don't think so because they look at each other and laugh. But Aoi presses on, unfettered. So we have to find the third one, right? To represent all three of them as a collective, as a group of friends. But Nico still doesn't quite get it. But Ren, you can tell, is still a little bit on her side when she's rolling her eyes, making fun of Nico, who's doing this weird crane dance. And this is where I almost started to really explain what was going to happen, where these kids were going, and was thinking about her vocalizing, Aoi that is. But I do that somewhat down below, but I didn't want to be too on the nose. I didn't want to be describing exactly what's going to happen, so I kept a little bit loose. So she's talking about, she was looking for the third crane. It must be there, stalking the shallows she knew were there but couldn't see, far behind like her, left behind like her. So I think you get the idea, but it's one of those situations where, sure, you could spell it out completely for the reader, but I prefer to hold back a little bit because I don't think they need it. I think it implies everything they didn't need to know, at least from the headspace of this young girl. Then finally the two cranes leave. They fly away toward the sun, and she stops to try to stall them yet again. She's feeling the sun on her face. She's remembering her friendship, all of the good times they had. These things representative of sort of her changing perspective for things being left behind. For her, again, trying to stall is the glass is slipping down her nose, but she doesn't adjust them. And she looks through these lenses, which are kind of warping the world in essence. And then not only warping the world, but warping her hands when she goes down to try to grab them from the grass. But before we get there, this is the vocalization I talked about. And you'll go away from summer like you always do, both of you, but it's different now. You'll be there and I'll be here, and then you'll be somewhere else after. So really, that's as much specificity as I get into about where these kids are going. And I think, again, another reason why I don't want to spell it out is because as an adult, when you're reading this, it's not a big deal unless you are really empathizing and you're getting in the headspace of what it's like to be a kid again and understanding that a different school, a different town is a world away. But here's where she's digging in the grass, looking for glasses. The world is an entire blur. She sees her fingers, which reminded her of the cranes, pale and slender, but then she's angry. She starts tearing at the grass. But her two friends return, and they say her voice in unison. And this is the first, really only physical description we get of Nico and Ren, which are evident in the artwork, where Nico is tall with long hair and Ren is shorter with shorter bobbed hair. But they kneel down and help her, right? They fix her braid. They return her glasses. This is when things turn for Aoi. She's starting to let go. She's starting to realize what she needs to do. And that's when the sun behind them dabbing the tops of their head with red, just like the cranes, which is now she is projecting these two friends onto those cranes. And then, of course, she ties her shoes for the fourth time. She is done. And I wish I would have had a little bit more significance to that number, but it's okay, here we are. And they're starting to reminisce. This is exactly what Aoi wanted, right? She's talking about when they played tag one time and Ren fell into the stream and pretending drowning, and they're laughing about it. But this is when we really vocalize the fact that Aoi is okay with her two friends moving away, and she's come to accept it, at least for now. So the two cranes pick their way through the reeds ahead before taking flight. And instead of Ren acknowledging the fact that these two cranes represent her and Aoi, it's now Nico and Ren when they say it's us, and she smiles and says it is. So a tale of growing up, a tale of loss, a tale of friendship, I think all of the above. It was one that I think the symbolism inside of it I didn't really quite grasp. I think when I looked at this image initially, I saw a girl hanging back. I saw two other girls in the distance walking away. You don't even see their faces, right? I mean, in subsequent pieces of art down below you do, but I wanted to stay away from that. I wanted to capture this painting in particular. And it really just reminded me of being a kid. I used to walk home from school every day, all the way up until I had a driver's license. And so the long walks that turned into journeys, going places we probably shouldn't have gone as kids, taking the long way home, let's say, were some good memories. And I did have some friends move away from an elementary school before we graduate. Well, you don't graduate elementary school, but before you leave elementary school. So it was weird because I didn't talk to those friends for some time, even though we didn't technically live that far apart. There's just something about moving schools that is such a massive change for kids, or at least I can only speak for myself. But overall, I think it was successful. I think I created some meaning in the story. I think I captured the nostalgia I wanted to capture. But let me know what you think. Did this remind you of being a kid? Did I capture my inner schoolgirl? But regardless of that fact, if you liked it, give me a like. If you liked the video, subscribe for story-related content. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.